Part 1. Intro and the Mesopotamian. Hey guys. Today we step into the blistering sun of southern Mesopotamia, where the Tigris and Euphrates carve their restless paths through endless plains. You stand at the edge of a ruined ziggurat, its ancient bricks warm beneath your palms, its shadow stretching across the dust like the memory of a vanished empire. The air shimmers, and for a moment you wonder if you're really alone, because here, 5,000 years ago, humanity claimed its first whispers of civilization. But here's the truth. You probably won't survive this world. The heat, the hunger, the sudden floods, the iron rule of gods that seem all too human in their jealousy and rage. And yet, within this harsh crucible, something astonishing was born writing. Astronomy, kingship, myths of beings who might not have been entirely of this earth. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And tell me in the comments where you're tuning in from, and what time it is where you are. I always love seeing the map light up with night owls, early birds, and the mysterious 3 a.m. wanderers. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Part 2. The Rivers and the First Cities. You find yourself standing on a narrow embankment where the Tigris and Euphrates wind like silver threads across a parched land. The morning sun strikes the water, dazzling your eyes, while reeds whisper in the breeze, and the earth beneath your feet feels soft from the silt deposited by last season's flood. This is Mesopotamia, the land between the rivers, the cradle of civilization, though it hardly looks like one at first glance. Imagine arriving here 5,000 years ago. The horizon is flat, open, exposed. Summer brings choking dust storms, while winter floods surge unpredictably, sweeping away entire villages in hours. And yet, instead of fleeing this place, people stayed. They learned the moods of the rivers, cut canals to tame their force, and coaxed wheat and barley from the marshes. It is here that cities were born, not just hamlets of mud huts, but true urban centers, pulsing with markets, temples, and rituals that tied heaven and earth together. Ahead rises Uruk, its walls stretching further than your eyes can follow. A visitor in the 4th millennium BC would have seen something unbelievable. Brick ramparts so wide that chariots could race across them. Ziggurats towering above the plain like stairways for the gods. Inside, the air would be alive with noise donkeys braying, potters turning wheels, priests chanting hymns that echo against clay. It was a city of more than 40,000 souls, a staggering number in an age when most of the world still lived in scattered villages. But Uruk was not alone. To the south, Eridu clung to the marshlands like a reflection of the stars above. Tradition claimed it was the very first city, founded when kingship itself descended from the heavens. Its temple of Enki, god of wisdom and water, was said to be older than memory, rebuilt and expanded by countless generations who believed the sacred site reached back to the dawn of humanity. Nearby Nippur became the religious heart of Sumer, the city of Enlil, whose decrees shaped the fate of mortals and gods alike. Pause for a moment. Look around. The cities do not seem random, they rise like a constellation across the plains, each with its own divine patron, each part of a system that feels both earthly and cosmic. The rivers feed them, but the heavens guide their growth. Could it be that the Sumerians saw their landscape as a mirror of the stars, aligning brick and temple with the movements of the sky? The clay tablets whisper their answer. In the ruins of Ur and Nippur, archaeologists have unearthed records etched in cuneiform, the world's first writing system. Grain rations, temple accounts, star charts. Practical, yes, but also profound. To write is to fix memory, to preserve law, to shape the future. And in doing so, the Sumerians created something no flood could wash away: civilization itself. Picture the marketplace at dawn. Merchants call out over piles of dates and jars of sesame oil. A boy balances a clay tablet on his knees, scratching marks with a reed stylus as his master dictates figures. Women carry baskets of beer, still frothing from the fermentation pits. Soldiers patrol with spears, their eyes scanning the crowd. Above them all, the ziggurat looms, its steps shimmering in the heat, a permanent reminder that human life here was always lived under the gaze of gods. Now compare this to our world. Today, skyscrapers dominate cities like New York, Dubai, or Shanghai. Highways carve through deserts, and satellites track the floods and droughts of our planet. Yet the impulse is the same as it was here: to organize, to control, to build permanence against the chaos of nature. The Sumerians were not so different. They faced unpredictable rivers. We face climate change. They recorded their transactions in clay. We code them in digital ledgers. Both reveal a single truth: civilizations are born from our refusal to let uncertainty rule our lives. Still, the mystery deepens. How did such complexity emerge so suddenly? There's no clear prelude, no gradual buildup we can trace. One moment, the world was scattered with Neolithic villages. The next, here were temples aligned with the stars, rulers claiming mandates from heaven, and writing systems as intricate as the spoken word. It feels abrupt, almost unnatural, as if knowledge arrived faster than evolution should allow. Was it pure human genius? Or did they inherit something, fragments of wisdom from cultures long lost to flood and sand? You lean closer to the ground. The soil here smells of wet clay and reeds, rich and fertile. It was this soil that made Sumer possible, but also fragile. Too much irrigation salted the fields. Too many floods washed away the canals. Entire cities could rise and fall within centuries. Yet, in their brief brilliance, they created templates for everything that came after: law codes, literature, mathematics, astronomy, and the very idea of the city as a living organism. In the distance, the horizon blurs. Dust devils rise and twist, as if carrying whispers from forgotten builders. You imagine the hum of voices that once filled these plain scribes. Farmers, priests, kings. The sound has faded, but the ruins remain, scattered across the desert like bones of a giant long gone. They remind us that even the first cities were both miracles and warnings. Miracles, because they proved what humans could achieve together. Warnings, because they show how fragile greatness can be when rivers shift or rulers overreach. And so, here at the meeting of the Tigris and Euphrates, we begin our journey into Sumerian mysteries. Cities that should not have existed, knowledge that seems too advanced, and gods who felt all too real. This was not just a civilization, it was a question posed across millennia. Where did this knowledge come from, and why does it still haunt us today? Air Art 3. The Ziggurats, Stairways to Heaven. The sun burns low on the horizon, painting the Mesopotamian plains in hues of amber and ochre. Ahead, rising from the flat expanse like the spine of a forgotten giant, is a ziggurat. Its mud brick steps climb tier upon tier into the sky, massive and silent, as though each layer holds the memory of prayers whispered thousands of years ago. You tilt your head back, and for a moment, it feels less like architecture and more like a question. What exactly were these structures meant to reach? The Sumerians called them houses of the gods. To the people of Ur, Uruk, and Eridu, the ziggurat wasn't just a template, it was the literal axis between heaven and earth. The base, grounded in fertile soil, symbolized the human realm. The summit, often topped with a shrine, was reserved for the divine, a place where mortals could approach but never truly belong. Priests ascended the stairs daily, carrying offerings of bread, beer, and incense. Each step brought them closer to the gods, yet reminded them of the distance that could never be crossed. Imagine standing among the crowd during a festival. Drums pound in rhythmic waves. Trumpets blast sharp notes into the hot air. Processions of priests climb the stairs in dazzling garments, their hems catching the sun, their arms laden with bowls of honey and sacrificial lambs. The scent of burning cedar fills your nostrils, mingling with sweat, dust, and the sweetness of figs passed through the crowd. To the Sumerians, this wasn't theater, it was survival. Without divine favor, the rivers would flood, the fields would fail, and the fragile order of their cities would crumble. But the ziggurat was more than a stage for ritual. Archaeologists now suspect that these stepped towers had astronomical functions. Their orientations often align with solstices, equinoxes, or the rising of Venus, the goddess Inanna's star. From their summits, priests could track the heavens, noting eclipses, planetary movements, and omens scratched later into clay. Think of them as the world's first observatories. Not glass domes and telescopes, but platforms of brick and faith, watching the skies with naked eyes and centuries of patience. The parallel to our own age is striking. Today we build skyscrapers with glass facades, office towers that pierce the clouds, monuments of steel and ambition. We climb them not to commune with gods, but to survey economies, to broadcast signals, to house networks of data. Yet the impulse feels familiar, the desire to rise above the earth, to reach a vantage point where meaning might be clearer. Perhaps our towers of finance and communication are descendants of the ziggurat, shaped by the same longing to touch the intangible. The myths only deepen the mystery. One story tells of the gods themselves descending upon these shrines, their presence marked by fire and sound. Another whispers that kings received their mandate atop the ziggurat, blessed beneath the stars. Was this symbolism, or did the Sumerians believe they had truly built stairways for visitors not of this world? The reliefs carved into stone offer tantalizing clues, beings in elaborate headgear, objects that look like tools or vessels, wings that may be symbolic or something more literal. Pause and imagine the night. The crowd is gone. The torches gutter, their smoke curling into the black sky. You are alone on the ziggurat's summit, the city below reduced to faint murmurs. Above, the heavens sprawl in impossible clarity. Venus glimmers like a nail hammered into darkness. The constellations shift slowly, patterns your ancestors have not yet named. You understand suddenly why these towers mattered. From here, the sky feels close, almost reachable. The boundary between mortal and divine blurs, and in that thin space, humans found both comfort and awe. What secrets might still lie inside these structures? Many ziggurats collapsed long ago, their bricks recycled into other buildings, their temples stripped bare. But fragments remain: ceremonial stairways, foundations that once bore shrines, clay tablets buried in their shadows. Each discovery raises new questions. Did the Sumerians hide knowledge within their walls? Were the alignments intentional, preserving a cosmic map in architecture? Or were these towers simply symbols of power, their true purpose more earthly than divine? Consider, too, the labor required. Tens of thousands of bricks, each molded by hand, dried in the relentless sun, stacked layer upon layer. The work demanded organization, central authority, and a population willing to sacrifice sweat for the promise of divine protection. Building a ziggurat was itself an act of faith not just in the gods, but in each other. It proved that humans, united by belief, could transform mud and reed into monuments that still defied time. And yet, the ruins whisper caution. For all their grandeur, ziggurats could not prevent decline. Cities fell, dynasties ended, sand buried shrines once alive with song. Today we climb skyscrapers and marvel at our own achievements. But will they too become silent skeletons in the future? Their glass shattered, their steel rusted, as forgotten as the Ziggurats of Sumer. You trace your hand across a crumbling brick. The texture is rough, crumbling into dust beneath your fingers. It is humbling to realize this dust once formed the centerpiece of a civilization, a bridge between heaven and earth. Perhaps that is the true message of the ziggurat, not that gods dwelled among us, but that humans always seek to climb, to reach, to hope that above the chaos of rivers and kings, there is something higher worth striving toward. The sun finally dips. Shadows stretch across the plains. The ziggurat glows in the fading light, a stairway carved not into mountains but raised from human hands. It stands as both question and answer, a relic of ambition and faith. And as darkness swallows the horizon, the first stars flicker awake, silent witnesses to the eternal human desire to bridge earth and sky. Part 4. The Anunnaki arrive. The air is heavy, almost electric, as dusk falls over the city of Uruk. Fires burn in clay braziers, sending coils of smoke into the evening sky. In the temple courtyards, priests chant hymns that echo against stone walls, their voices rising and falling like the pulse of something greater. You can feel it, the presence of beings the Sumerians called the Anunnaki. To them, these were not abstract gods, but powerful figures whose will shaped every harvest, every law, every human fate. Who were they, really? On clay tablets carved with wedge-shaped script, their names appear with unsettling frequency. Enlil, Lord of the Winds, a stern enforcer who distributed resources and punished disobedience. Enki, master of water and wisdom, a benefactor who taught humanity to write, to irrigate, to plant. Ki, the earth goddess. Anu, the sky father. Together, they formed a hierarchy that mirrored human society but reached into the heavens. Imagine standing in the temple of Enlil at Nippur. The walls are lined with offerings, grain, cattle, beer, tribute to a god both revered and feared. The priests tell you that Enlil's word is law. The kings rule only with his blessing. Outside, farmers bend their backs in the fields, believing each stalk of barley grows at his command. Inside, Enlil's statue towers above you, carved eyes staring into eternity. Is it stone or something more? The stories complicate the picture. Some texts claim the Anunnaki did not always dwell in heaven. They descended in shining vessels, bringing with them knowledge that transformed human society overnight. Others describe them as miners of gold, resources gathered not merely for wealth, but for mysterious purposes now lost. Were these allegories for trade and power memories of something stranger? Look closely at the art. Reliefs show tall humanoid figures with wings and elaborate helmets, towering over human attendants. They hold strange implements rods, rings, buckets that scholars debate even today. To archaeologists, these are symbols of divinity, stylized representations of power. But the scale, the precision, the recurring motifs raise unsettling questions. Why wings, if not to fly? Why helmets that resemble modern visors? Why the persistent image of gods handing down tools, tablets, or knowledge? The myths reflect dualities. Enki is compassionate, clever, often helping humans survive floods or famine. Enlil is stern, wrathful, enforcing cosmic order through punishment. Their conflict mirrors human experience: mercy versus law, creation versus destruction. It also suggests something beyond metaphor, as though these figures embodied forces that guided civilization itself. Pause and think. If you were a farmer 5,000 years ago, kneeling in the fields at dawn, you would not see these beings as distant myth. Their presence was immediate. A failed harvest was Enlil's displeasure. A sudden flood was his wrath. A breakthrough in irrigation Enki's gift. The Anunnaki were woven into daily life, every prayer, every decision. To doubt them would be to doubt the very structure of reality. And yet the consistency of their descriptions is unnerving. Across cities, across centuries, the same names, the same roles, the same narratives repeat with astonishing precision. Were the Sumerians simply preserving symbolic traditions? Or could they have been recording collective memories of real encounters, later framed in myth? Consider the comparison with our own time. Today we speak of artificial intelligence, of spacefaring civilizations, of genetic engineering. If our world collapsed tomorrow, how would survivors describe us millennia later? Would they remember engineers as gods of machines? Would airplanes be shining vessels descending from the heavens? Would computers become tablets of knowledge gifted by divine hands? Perhaps the Sumerians were not inventing but interpreting, framing the incomprehensible in the only language they had. Archaeologists, of course, urge caution. They remind us that myth is not history, that the Anunnaki were likely symbolic embodiments of natural forces, social structures, and celestial patterns. The Sumerians, after all, were masterful observers of the stars. They tracked Venus, the moon, Jupiter, with precision that rivals much later civilizations. It makes sense that their gods would reflect the heavens, each deity tethered to a celestial body, each myth encoding astronomical cycles. But speculation lingers. Some texts speak of a home beyond Earth, a distant realm from which the Anunnaki came. Later writers would call it Nibiru, the 12th planet. The orbit was said to be vast, thousands of years long, bringing the gods back only rarely, but always with consequence. Could this be allegory? Or could it reflect an ancient memory of cosmic events, encoded in myth because language had no better container? Picture yourself at night, lying on the warm bricks of a ziggurat's terrace. The stars spill across the black sky, brilliant and countless. Beside you, a priest points upward, tracing paths with his finger. That, he says, is Inanna's star. That is Enlil's path. That is the home of those who gave us kingship. You feel the weight of it, the possibility that somewhere out there, in the endless dark, something once stirred and reached for Earth. What makes the Anunnaki so compelling is not certainty, but ambiguity. Were they gods? Aliens? Archetypes? Perhaps all three. They embody humanity's deepest questions. Where did knowledge come from? Why did civilization bloom so suddenly? And are we truly alone? Even now, standing amid the ruins, the questions feel alive. Clay and stone crumble, but the stories endure. The Anunnaki remain enigmatic, persistent, half divine, half human, a mirror of ourselves and a shadow of something greater. Their myths whisper across millennia, inviting us not to answer, but to wonder. Error Art 5. The Divine Hierarchies. The city quiets as night deepens, but in the temples the chanting does not stop. Torches flicker along the stairways of ziggurats, their flames trembling in the desert wind. Within these sanctuaries the world was organized not by kings or councils, but by gods, and the Sumerians believed those gods arranged themselves in hierarchies as intricate as any earthly court. At the pinnacle stood Anu, the Sky Father, silent and remote. He did not descend often into the affairs of mortals. Instead, he ruled as a symbol of ultimate authority. Beneath him was Enlil, the Lord of the Winds, whose stern decrees ordered both the natural world and human society. He punished without hesitation, stripping kings of their thrones, sending storms to scour fields. And then came Enki, the god of fresh water and wisdom, a counterbalance to Enlil's severity. Enki gave generously, teaching irrigation, medicine, and even the secrets of writing. Where Enlil ruled with law, Enki guided with cleverness. Around them gathered a constellation of deities, each with a portfolio that touched human life. Inanna, goddess of love and war, radiant and unpredictable, blessing marriages one day and leading armies the next. Utu, the sun god, illuminating justice as he traveled across the sky. Nanna, the moon god, charting time itself. Each played a role in shaping not only the cosmos, but the rules of human society. Now imagine yourself in Nippur, entering the temple of Enlil. The priests stand in white linen robes, their heads shaved, their voices rising in chants that have echoed for centuries. The air smells of cedar smoke and roasted lamb. Tablets are brought forth, lists of offerings, decrees of land ownership, judgments of disputes. The temple is not only a place of worship, it is a courthouse, a treasury, a school, a government office. Enlil's authority flows through every transaction, every decision. To the Sumerians, divine hierarchy was not separate from human order, it was its very foundation. Think of how familiar this sounds. In modern nations, we speak of constitutions, parliaments, presidents, and courts. The names have changed, but the structure feels eerily similar. Power is tiered, authority flows downward, and each level has its responsibilities. The Sumerians projected their understanding of order onto the heavens, or perhaps they modeled their society on what they believed they saw in the divine. Either way, the result was the same, a layered cosmos, with humans forever beneath, but never entirely excluded. What makes this system so fascinating is how human it seems. These were not flawless deities. Enlil's wrath could be excessive, destroying not only the guilty, but the innocent. Inanna's passions could turn to violence as easily as to love. Even Enki, so often portrayed as wise, tricked and deceived when it suited his purposes. Their flaws mirrored those of kings and rulers. In a way, the divine hierarchy reflected the truth the Sumerians knew all too well. Power is never pure. Authority is always contested, and even gods act with ambition and envy. Pause and consider the psychological effect. To live in this world was to feel constantly under observation, your life weighed against cosmic standards. Did your family prosper? Then Enki smiled upon you. Did your crops fail? Perhaps Enlil was displeased. Every event was both political and divine, every outcome tied to a hierarchy that humans could influence only through prayer, sacrifice, and obedience. Archaeologists have uncovered hymns that read like political speeches. Inanna is praised not only as goddess of beauty, but as the bringer of victory in battle. Enlil is exalted as the one who grants kingship from heaven. These texts served a dual purpose: worship and propaganda. By praising the gods, kings reinforced their own legitimacy, claiming their rule as divine mandate. The hierarchy in heaven justified the hierarchy on earth. It is tempting to dismiss this as superstition. But think about our own societies. Do we not also create hierarchies, frame them in stories, justify them with ideals? We speak of the rule of law, the will of the people, natural rights. These are abstractions, yet we treat them as sacred, untouchable, higher than any individual. The Sumerians gave theirs names and faces. We give ours words and symbols. The impulse is the same. The clay tablets add another layer. They describe councils of gods, debates between Enlil and Enki, rivalries between Inanna and other deities. These stories resemble political dramas, complete with shifting alliances and betrayals. Perhaps they were allegories for human politics, encoded in myth. Or perhaps the Sumerians truly believed their world was a reflection of the divine court above. Either way, the result is clear. Hierarchy gave order to chaos, meaning to suffering, and purpose to ambition. Picture again the night sky above Mesopotamia. To the Sumerians, each bright point was not just a star but a throne, a presence in the cosmic order. The heavens were a kingdom, and earth was but one province, ruled by gods who could bless or destroy. Their hierarchies may seem alien to us now, but listen closely, and you will hear their echo in our boardrooms, parliaments, and courts. The names have changed, but the structure remains. And so, as the chanting fades and the fires burn low, you realize something haunting. The divine hierarchies of Sumer were never just about gods. They were about yous, about how we imagine order, justify power, and explain the mysteries of existence. The Anunnaki may no longer walk among us, but their hierarchies linger, etched into our laws, our religions, our very sense of what it means to live in a world governed by forces greater than ourselves. Part 6. The 12th Planet Theory. The night stretches wide above Mesopotamia, a dome of black velvet studded with countless stars. You lie on your back atop a ziggurat's terrace, the bricks still warm from the day's sun. Around you, priests whisper and point, their fingers tracing patterns across the sky. They speak of constellations, eclipses, and omens. But among their stories is one that unsettles even the most skeptical listener, the tale of a world beyond, a 12th planet, home of the gods. The Sumerians were meticulous observers of the heavens. Their records track the movements of Jupiter, Mars, Venus, and the Moon with astonishing precision. They divided the year into 12 months, each tied to lunar cycles. They mapped the path of the sun and built calendars that guided planting and ritual alike. And yet, within their myths, something stranger emerges. References to an additional celestial body, a world not accounted for among the familiar lights. Later interpreters would call it Nibiru, the planet of crossing. Some texts suggest it appeared in the sky only rarely, its orbit vast and elongated, taking millennia to return. Others describe it as the dwelling place of the Anunnaki, the origin of their knowledge, the homeland they departed before descending to Earth. Was this a poetic metaphor? A celestial myth encoded in star lore? Or could it have been something more a memory of a cosmic truth we have yet to rediscover? Imagine the perspective of a Sumerian priest scanning the heavens with the naked eye. Night after night, year after year, recording patterns on clay tablets. The stars became familiar companions, their rising and setting as reliable as the seasons. But every so often, something unexpected appeared, a strange brightness, a wandering body that defied prediction. How would you interpret it? Perhaps as an intruder from beyond, a messenger of gods, a sign that the cosmos itself was alive. The speculation persists even now. Modern astronomers search the outer reaches of our solar system for evidence of a hidden planet, a massive body whose gravity might explain the odd tilts of distant orbits. They call it Planet 9, but the echo is uncanny. Sumerian Nibiru, modern science's elusive phantom. Could myth and observation be two faces of the same pursuit, the attempt to map the unseen? Pause and compare. Today, telescopes like Hubble and James Webb peer into galaxies billions of light-years away. We hunt for exoplanets, worlds orbiting alien suns, scanning their atmospheres for signs of life. To the Sumerians, this would be unthinkable. Yet their impulse was the same. They looked at the night sky and asked, "What else is out there? Are we alone?" The difference is only in tools clay tablets then, space telescopes now. But there is more to the Nibiru myth than astronomy. The stories tie it to cycles of catastrophe. Some claim the planet's return brings upheaval, floods, storms, shifts that alter the course of civilization. To the Sumerians, whose lives were at the mercy of rivers that could bless or destroy overnight, such imagery made sense. Cosmic order and earthly survival were one and the same. If the heavens shifted, so too would the world below. Imagine a night long ago. The people of Uruk gather in the temple courtyard, eyes lifted as priests announce a celestial omen. A new star burns in the darkness, brighter than Mars, unaccounted for on their tablets. Murmurs ripple through the crowd. Is it Nibiru? Is it the return of the gods? The priests raise their arms, chanting prayers to appease whatever forces approach. Fear and awe mingle in the air, the boundary between science and myth dissolving. Skeptics argue, of course. They remind us that myths evolve, that fragments can be misinterpreted. Perhaps Nibiru was never a planet at all, but a symbolic term for transition, a crossing between ages or reigns. Perhaps it marked the equinox, when the sun itself seems to cross the heavens in a new path. The evidence is debated, disputed, uncertain, and yet the persistence of the story suggests it spoke to something deeper than mere allegory. Ask yourself, why does this idea still grip us? Why, thousands of years later, do people scour the skies for hidden worlds, invoking the same imagery the Sumerians once used? Perhaps because we, too, feel the fragility of our place in the cosmos. We look up and sense that Earth cannot be the whole story. The Sumerians gave that intuition a name, Nibiru. We give it numbers and equations. But the longing is the same. The 12th planet theory reminds us of two truths. First, that the Sumerians were extraordinary sky watchers, blending faith with observation in ways that shaped civilization itself. Second, that myth and science are not enemies, but partners, two languages attempting to describe the same wonder. To call Nibiru real or unreal misses the point. What matters is the question it raises. What worlds remain unseen? What knowledge waits beyond the horizon? The night deepens. The stars wheel slowly, ancient and indifferent. The priests extinguish their torches, leaving only the glimmer of the heavens above. You close your eyes, and for a moment, you can almost believe you hear the gods whispering in the darkness, promising that one day, their hidden world will return. Part 7. The Tablet of Destinies. The hall is silent except for the crackle of firelight. In your hands lies a vision, not of clay or stone, but of something greater, the Tablet of Destinies. To the Sumerians, this was no ordinary artifact. It was the cosmic contract, the divine blueprint that bound heaven and earth together. Whoever held it ruled not just mortals, but gods themselves. The myths are clear. The tablet determined fates. It was carved with the decrees of the universe, inscribed not by human hands, but by powers beyond comprehension. To possess it was to command destiny itself, storms, harvests, kingships, even the rise and fall of cities. Enlil was said to be its rightful keeper, but stories tell of thefts, betrayals, battles fought not with swords, but with authority over reality. Picture the scene. A council of gods gathers in a temple, their voices rising in debate. Suddenly, one deity reveals the tablet in his grasp. The others fall silent, their authority stripped away in an instant. With this object, even the highest are powerless. The hierarchy of heaven trembles. Imagine the fear, the awe. One artifact, and the cosmos bends. What exactly was the tablet? Scholars suggest it may have symbolized written law, the codification of divine order into clay. In a society where writing itself was new and mysterious, the idea of an object that writes destiny would have felt both magical and terrifying. Others speculate it reflected astronomical records, a map of the skies so accurate that it determined the seasons, eclipses, and omens. To control it would be to control time itself. Think about how this resonates today. We too speak of documents that shape worlds. A constitution, declaring the rights of citizens and the powers of rulers. A treaty, dividing empires or forging alliances. A line of code in a server farm, shifting markets, erasing wealth, launching revolutions. Each is fragile, written on paper or silicon. And yet, each holds destinies within its symbols. The Tablet of Destinies is not so far from our own tablets, the ones glowing in our hands, feeding us words and images that shape what we believe, how we act, what we become. But to the Sumerians, the tablet was more than metaphor. It was contested. In one myth, the storm god Ninurta seizes it after a fierce battle, only to have it stolen away by a trickster. In another, it falls into the hands of a usurper, throwing the cosmos into chaos until it is reclaimed. These stories reveal a truth the Sumerians knew well. Power is never stable. Authority is fragile. What seems eternal can be stolen in a moment. Imagine the terror of a city awakening to news that the tablet has been taken. Priests rushing to temples, citizens whispering in fear. Will the rivers still rise? Will the sun still return tomorrow? The sense that without this object, the fabric of the universe might unravel. Power, once unquestioned, exposed as contingent, dependent on possession of a single artifact. Now compare it with our present. What if tomorrow a nation's constitution disappeared not just physically, but from memory, erased as if it never existed? What if the algorithms running financial systems or defense networks were stolen, rewritten, unleashed? Would we not also feel that reality itself had slipped from our grasp? That is what the Tablet of Destinies represented, the ultimate key, the vulnerability at the heart of order. Pause and consider the symbolism. The tablet suggests that even gods needed laws, that even divinity was bound by written decree. Power was not absolute, it was negotiated, contested, documented. Perhaps the Sumerians, in inventing writing, intuited this truth. To record is to rule. Without writing, power is ephemeral. With it, power endures. The myths invite one more question. Could the tablet have been real? Some theorists speculate it was not clay at all, but a technologia device, a relic of knowledge from beyond. They point to descriptions of glowing, unbreakable material, inscriptions too intricate for human hands. Was it memory encoded, a kind of cosmic hard drive? Or were these simply poetic exaggerations of the awe inspired by writing itself? Whatever the answer, the lesson lingers. The Tablet of Destinies is not just an artifact of myth. It is a symbol of humanity's oldest struggle. Who controls the story? Who writes the future? Kings, priests, gods each fought not only for land or wealth, but for the power to define what is and what must be. In that sense, every tablet, every scroll, every law written since is a descendant of the Sumerian vision. You place the imagined tablet back upon its altar. The firelight flickers across its surface, casting shadows that seem to move on their own. Outside, the city sleeps, unaware that their world depends on this fragile object. Inside, the gods whisper, and you understand. Destiny is never fixed. It is written, guarded, contested, and always vulnerable to those bold enough to seize the pen. Part 8. The Great Flood. The air thickens, heavy with the scent of rain. Dark clouds gather above the Mesopotamian plain, their bellies swollen with water. Farmers pause in their fields, eyes lifting to the horizon, sensing a storm unlike any before. To the Sumerians, floods were both gift and curse, depositing fertile silt, but also sweeping away entire villages. And so it is little wonder that in their myths, the greatest catastrophe of all was not fire or war, but water. This is the story of the Great Flood, the deluge that almost ended humanity. According to the tablets, it began with discontent among the gods. Humanity, they said, had grown too numerous, too noisy. Enlil, stern and unyielding, demanded silence. His solution was absolute: destroy mankind with a flood that would cleanse the earth. Other gods agreed, weary of the chaos, but one voice opposed the Menki, the trickster of wisdom and water. Secretly, he whispered to a man named Ziusudra, warning him of the coming storm. Imagine Ziusudra standing by the riverbank at twilight, the wind cold against his skin. He hears the whisper of Enki, feels the tremor of destiny in his chest. Build a boat, he is told. Seal it with pitch. Gather your family, your animals, seeds of the earth. The flood is coming, and only you will endure. The story unfolds with eerie familiarity. Ziusudra obeys, constructing a vessel large enough to ride out the rising waters. When the rains fall, they do not stop. For days, weeks, the heavens pour, the rivers swell, and the land disappears beneath a boundless sea. Humanity drowns, cities crumble, temples vanish. Only the ark remains, bobbing in an endless gray. And then silence. The waters recede. The ark comes to rest upon a mountaintop. Ziusudra steps onto dry land, releasing birds to search for life. He builds an altar, offers sacrifice. The gods, seeing his devotion, relent. Enlil, though angered, accepts the survival of humanity. Life begins anew. Sound familiar? It should. The echoes ripple across cultures. In the Hebrew Bible, Noah builds an ark, saves his family, sends forth a dove. In Hindu tradition, Manu is warned by a fish, rescues seeds of life, survives the flood. In Greek myth, Deucalion and Pyrrha endure a deluge sent by Zeus. From the Andes to the Pacific, stories of floods recur, as if the memory of rising waters is etched into our collective soul. Why floods? Because they are universal. Every civilization has known the sudden terror of too much water. Rivers swell, storms rage, seas rise without warning. To those who lived close to nature, floods were not abstract, they were death, swift and indiscriminate. The Sumerians gave that terror a face: Enlil's wrath, Enki's mercy, Ziusudra's survival. Pause and imagine the psychology. To live in a city like Ur was to live always under threat. The rivers that sustained life could betray you overnight. A storm could erase decades of labor in hours. The flood myth, then, is not just a story, it is a memory, a warning, a truth dressed in divine language. It explains why humanity suffers, why survival is fragile, why mercy must be cherished. But some wonder, could it reflect a real event? Archaeologists have uncovered layers of silt in Mesopotamian ruins, evidence of sudden flooding around 2900 BC. Could a catastrophic flood have swept across Sumer, remembered for generations, retold as myth? Or was it broader still a memory of melting glaciers, rising seas at the end of the Ice Age? If so, the Great Flood is not just Sumerian, not just biblical, it is human history itself. Think of how the story resonates today. Rising seas, hurricanes, climate change or anxieties echo theirs. We, too, live with the knowledge that water can erase what we build. Our arcs, our technology, data backups, disaster plans. But the fear is the same, that one day the flood will come and survival will depend on foresight, luck, and perhaps mercy beyond our control. The myth also teaches something subtler. Ziusudra did not survive by strength or wealth, but by listening, by heeding the warning whispered in the dark. His obedience, his humility, saved not just himself, but humanity. Perhaps the Sumerians meant to remind us, wisdom lies not in denying disaster, but in preparing for it. Picture the aftermath. The plain stretches before you, scarred by water, dotted with ruins. Smoke rises from hastily rebuilt huts. Survivors cling to rituals, lighting fires, praying that the gods will never again unleash such fury. Yet the fear lingers. What if they do? What if another deluge waits just beyond the horizon of time? And so the flood story endures, retold again and again, across continents, across millennia. It is both history and metaphor, memory and myth. It tells us that civilizations rise not because they conquer nature, but because they survive it. That every age is temporary, every city vulnerable, every future uncertain. As you walk away from the ruins, you hear the echo of rushing water, though the rivers are calm. It is the sound of memory, a reminder that the flood never truly ends. It recedes, it returns, in myth and in life. And like Ziusudra, we are left to ask, will we be ready when it comes again? Part 9. The King List. The tablet is small, its surface cracked and worn by time, but the words carved upon it are staggering. This is the Sumerian King List, a record that claims to trace the rulers of Mesopotamia from the dawn of civilization to the rise of known dynasties. At first glance, it looks like simple history names, cities, years of reign. But then you notice the numbers. Some kings are said to have ruled for thousands of years. The text begins with a declaration. When kingship descended from heaven, it was an eridu. The phrase is simple, yet seismic. Kingship is not portrayed as a human invention, but a gift or perhaps a burden bestowed by the gods. The first rulers are said to have governed before the flood, with reigns measured not in decades, but in millennia. A lulam of eridu, 28,800 years. A lalangar, 36,000 years. These are not lifespans as we know them, they are epochs, stretches of time so vast they blur into myth. Imagine standing in a temple as a scribe reads these records aloud. The people around you listen in awe, their eyes wide. The message is clear. Kingship is eternal, ordained by heaven, reaching back to the very creation of order itself. By invoking such ancestry, living rulers cloak themselves in legitimacy. They are not just men, they are heirs to a cosmic legacy. But what do we make of it today? Scholars debate. Some argue the numbers are symbolic, representing cycles of time, astronomical patterns encoded in mythic reigns. Perhaps each reign marked the movement of planets or the passage of lunar calendars. Others suggest exaggeration, a way for rulers to magnify their authority by claiming divine antiquity. And yet, the precision of the text is unsettling. The list does not simply inflate numbers, it carefully divides eras. Before the flood, reigns are impossibly long. After the flood, they shrink dramatically, closer to human lifespans, still lengthy by our standards, but recognizably mortal. It is as if the flood marked a cosmic reset, a transition from mythic time to human history. Pause and consider the possibility. Could the king list preserve memories of an earlier age, distorted by myth but not entirely false? Were there rulers, perhaps not human as we know them, whose reigns stretched across generations? Or was it all allegory, a poetic way of saying that power, once divine, became fragile after the flood? Think of parallels elsewhere. In the Hebrew Bible, patriarchs like Methuselah lived for centuries before the flood, their lifespans shrinking dramatically afterward. In Chinese tradition, the 3 sovereigns and 5 emperors ruled for centuries in a golden age before history properly begins. Again and again, cultures preserve the same motif. An ancient era when leaders lived impossibly long, followed by a decline into mortality. Coincidence or shared memory of something humanity once believed. Now imagine the impact on a Sumerian subject. Hearing that your king traced his authority to a lineage stretching back 20,000 years, you would feel both awe and resignation. Rebellion would seem futile. How can you oppose a ruler whose throne was established by heaven itself? The king list was not just history, it was propaganda, shaping belief, legitimizing authority, binding people to the order of their world. And yet, its very strangeness invites doubt. What if those numbers were not exaggerations, but records of a different reality? Some fringe theorists suggest the pre-flood kings were not human, but Anunnaki themselves, ruling for millennia before handing power to mortals. The sudden shortening of reigns after the flood could then mark the withdrawal of these beings, leaving humanity to govern alone. Whether symbolic or literal, the king list reveals something profound about the Sumerian mind. They did not see time as uniform. There was mythic time when gods walked among men, and there was human time when kings reigned for decades, not millennia. History for them was layered, with a rupture, the flood dividing eternity from mortality. Picture the scene centuries later. A scribe sits in a dimly lit chamber, clay stylus in hand, copying the king list for yet another temple archive. He does not question the numbers. They are sacred. Each line ties the present to the past, the king he serves to the gods above. Outside, the city bustles, unaware that their future rests on these fragile lines of cuneiform. Inside, the scribe presses on, ensuring the myth of legitimacy endures. Compare this to our present. Modern leaders, too, seek legitimacy through ancestry, constitution, tradition. We no longer claim reigns of 36,000 years, but we speak of founding fathers, divine rights, sacred documents. We trace authority backward, not forward, because continuity reassures us. The Sumerians were no different. The king list gave their rulers not just power, but eternity. And so the tablet remains, cracked and incomplete, but still echoing across time. It tells us of kings who ruled before memory, of floods that reset the world, of a lineage that binds heaven and earth. Whether myth, metaphor, or distorted history, it forces us to ask, how much of what we call history is shaped not by fact, but by the stories rulers want us to believe? You set the tablet down, its surface rough beneath your fingertips. The numbers linger in your mind for 36,000 years, 28,800 years, impossible yet insistent. Outside, the wind stirs the reeds, the rivers flow as they have for millennia, kings rise and fall, but the question remains, who truly writes history, and how much of it is destiny? Part 10. The Me, Divine Decree of Civilization. The temple chamber is cool, its walls lined with clay tablets stacked like bricks of memory. At the center sits a chest, gilded and adorned with carved sigils. Inside, the Sumerians believed, lay the most precious of all treasures, not gold, not jewels, but the Me. The word sounds simple, but its meaning is anything but. The Me were divine decrees, sacred blueprints that defined civilization itself. They were not laws in the way we think of them, written rules that could be changed or repealed, but cosmic principles, eternal programs written into the fabric of reality. To the Sumerians, everything that made society possible, kingship, priesthood, wisdom, truth, music, weaving, even prostitution existed because the gods had decreed it, parceled it out, and stored it in the Me. Imagine unrolling a list. On it are inscribed not objects, but essences, the Me of kingship, the Me of truth, the Me of song, each one not invented by humans but delivered from the heavens. Without them, there is no order, no city, no culture. With them, civilization flourishes. The Me were the software of existence, the operating system by which humanity functioned. The myths tell us that Enki, god of wisdom, was their custodian. His temple in Eridu housed the Me, and from there he distributed them to gods and mortals alike. But, as always in Sumerian stories, the order was fragile. In one tale, the goddess Inanna visits Enki, feasts with him, and through cunning or perhaps intoxication manages to seize the Me. She carries them to her city of Uruk, ensuring its rise as the cultural heart of Sumer. Imagine the triumph. Processions of people celebrating as Inanna displays her prizes, the gifts of civilization itself, paraded like captured relics. But theft is never simple. Enki realizes what has happened and sends his servants to retrieve them. The river itself rises against Inanna's boat. Storms lash the waters. Yet she prevails, bringing the Me safely to Uruk. The myth may sound like fable, but its message is profound. Civilization is contested. Culture is not static, and the very principles that define us can shift from one place to another, carried not by law, but by power, cunning, and chance. Pause and reflect. What does it mean to say that music, kingship, or truth exists only because of divine decrees? Perhaps it reflects the Sumerians' understanding that culture is fragile, not natural but constructed, something that must be bestowed and guarded. To them, nothing about society was inevitable. Writing, farming, justice, all had to be given, sanctioned, preserved. Without the ME, humanity would revert to chaos. Think of our own world. Do we not too live by invisible decrees? Today we call them protocols, systems, laws of code. The operating system on your device dictates how information flows, what can be stored, what can be erased. Global financial systems, written in algorithms, determine who thrives and who fails. Our civilization is likewise encoded just not on clay tablets, but in silicon. The Sumerians sensed this truth long before we did. And yet, the myths complicate it. The ME were not always noble. Alongside wisdom and truth were darker decrees. War, strife, destruction. To be human was not just to sing and weave, but to kill and conquer. The gods gave all, the good and the terrible, because all were part of existence. Civilization, then, was not utopia, it was balance, a blend of creation and destruction, progress and decay. Imagine yourself as a Sumerian priest reciting the list of ME before an altar. Each word you speak reaffirms order, binds society to the divine. Farmers sow their fields because the ME decrees agriculture. Judges weigh disputes because the ME decrees justice. Even the prostitute in the temple is sanctified, her role not shameful but necessary, part of the cosmic program. The ME did not moralize, they simply declared what was. Now consider the political dimension. By claiming to possess the ME, a city claimed legitimacy. Uruk's supremacy was not only military, but cultural. Inanna's theft from Enki ensured her city was the repository of civilization itself. Kings could rule only by aligning themselves with the decrees. To defy them was to defy the very structure of reality. In this sense, the ME were not just metaphysical, they were propaganda, cementing power, shaping identity, unifying people under divine order. But the myth also whispers something more subversive. If Inanna could steal the ME, then civilization itself could be stolen, transferred, altered. Culture was not immutable, it was portable, fragile, vulnerable to cunning as much as to force. What does that say about us? Perhaps that what we call civilization is never permanent, never inevitable. It must be renewed, defended, and, at times, reinvented. Picture the scene centuries later. A traveler arrives in Uruk, marveling at its bustling markets, its temple songs, its artisans weaving bright cloth. He asks why this city thrives while others falter. The answer comes in whispers. Because Inanna brought us the me. In those words lies the pride of a people who believe their greatness rests not on chance, but on possession of the very decrees of existence. And perhaps, in a sense, they were right. Every civilization has its ME, its invisible codes that make it possible. For the Romans, it was law. For medieval Europe, it was faith. For us, it is data. Strip any of these away, and society collapses. The Sumerians understood that truth in their bones. They encoded it in myth, but we live it daily. As you leave the temple, the night air presses close. The stars glitter, silent judges of civilizations that rise and fall. You wonder, what are our ME today? And who, like Inanna, might one day steal them, carrying them to another place, another age? Part 11, The Lost Libraries. The night is still, broken only by the rustle of reeds along the riverbank. You walk through the ruins of an ancient city, your torchlight casting long shadows on walls half swallowed by sand. Beneath your feet lies dust. But once, here, there was knowledge, an ocean of it. Clay tablets stacked in rooms like bricks of eternity. The Sumerians built not just cities of stone, but libraries of memory. And most of them are gone. Imagine entering the great library of Nippur. Rows upon rows of shelves hold tablets inscribed with cuneiform, hymns to the gods, contracts of trade, astronomical records, medical recipes, myths, and epics. The air is heavy with the scent of clay and smoke from oil lamps. Scribes move quietly, stylus in hand, pressing wedge-shaped impressions into soft clay before leaving tablets to harden in the sun. Each stroke is a thread, binding human lives to eternity. But eternity is fragile. Floods sweep in, fires rage, enemies plunder, clay shatters, temples collapse, whole archives disappear, leaving only fragments. What survives today is astonishing, tens of thousands of tablets, but it is a fraction of what once existed. For every hymn of Inanna we can read, dozens have been lost. For every law of Ur-Nammu we can study, countless decrees are dust. The libraries that once held the full measure of Sumer's wisdom are now silent tombs. Pause for a moment. Think about what that means. Somewhere in the desert, beneath unmarked mounds, there may lie tablets that could rewrite history, records of kings forgotten, myths untold, perhaps even the origins of the Sumerians themselves. The ground hides secrets deeper than any ziggurat, and we may never see them. This sense of loss is not unique. We mourn the Library of Alexandria, burned in antiquity. We lament medieval monasteries where texts crumbled from neglect. Knowledge is fragile, always on the edge of vanishing. And yet, the Sumerians tried to preserve it. They invented writing not just to count grain, but to defy oblivion. Every stroke of the stylus was a rebellion against forgetting. Imagine a scribe at work in Ur. His fingers are stained with clay. He copies a hymn older than memory, pressing each symbol carefully, knowing that if he fails, the words may be lost forever. Outside, children play in the dust, unaware that their world hangs on fragile tablets. The scribe works by lamplight, driven by a quiet urgency, to capture, to save, to resist the tide of time. Now compare this to our world. We, too, build libraries, digital ones. Petabytes of data stored in servers humming in glass towers. But ask yourself, how secure are they? What happens if the power fails? The code corrupts. The networks collapse. Are we so different from the Sumerians, scratching our truths onto fragile clay? Perhaps we are more vulnerable. At least clay endures for millennia, buried in sand. Can we say the same for silicon? The lost libraries remind us of something deeper. Civilization is not just about building cities, but about preserving memory. A ziggurat may crumble, a palace may fall, but knowledge, if saved, outlives them all. The tragedy of Sumer is that so much was lost. The triumph is that enough survived to whisper their story across 5,000 years. Think of the myths preserved in fragments. The Epic of Gilgamesh, rediscovered from shattered tablets in Nineveh, telling us of friendship, mortality, and the search for immortality. Hymns to Inanna, fierce and tender, survived only by chance. If these survived, what epics, what songs, what histories did not? It is like listening to an orchestra with only a few instruments left intact. You hear the melody, but the harmony is missing. And yet, perhaps that is what makes the mystery so compelling. The gaps invite imagination. The silence between fragments hums with possibility. Scholars fill in what they can, but much remains unknown. The Sumerians, ironically, live on not through certainty, but through enigma. The missing libraries turn their history into a puzzle, one we are still trying to solve. Picture yourself kneeling in the dust of an excavation. You brush away the sand and find a shard of clay, no larger than your palm. On it are a few faint wedge marks. Perhaps it is a fragment of a myth we know, or perhaps it is a line from a story no one has read for 5,000 years. You hold it up to the light, and for a moment, the silence of millennia breaks. A voice speaks again. That is the power of the written word. But then the shard slips from your hand. It crumbles. The voice vanishes. You are reminded how easily knowledge dies. The Sumerians understood this, and so they wrote obsessively. They recorded not just the sacred, but the mundane debts, rations, legal disputes. To them, memory was not just myth, but measurement, numbers pressed into clay. And by preserving the everyday, they ensured that even when epics were lost, traces of their lives endured. As you leave the ruins, the wind scatters dust over your footprints. Somewhere beneath lies another library, waiting, silent. Perhaps archaeologists will one day uncover it. Perhaps not. But the thought lingers. How much of who we are depends not on what survives, but on what has already been lost. Our chapter 12, The Sumerian Language Mystery. You sit in a dim archive room. Clay tablets spread before you, each one etched with tiny wedge-shaped symbols. A scribe, long dead, pressed these signs into wet clay 5,000 years ago. Today, scholars can read them. They can translate contracts, hymns, recipes, even jokes. But beneath this mastery lies a deeper puzzle, one that still resists explanation. For all their skill in reading Sumerian, no one can say where the language came from. Sumerian is what linguists call a language isolate a tongue with no known relatives, no family tree to trace. Unlike Akkadian, which links to Semitic roots, or Hittite, which belongs to Indo-European, Sumerian stands alone. It is as if it appeared fully formed, used for centuries, and then vanished, leaving no descendants. Imagine arriving in a classroom of languages. Indo-European dominates one corner, English, Latin, Sanskrit, Greek, all cousins of the same vast clan. Across the room, Semitic tongues, cluster Hebrew, Arabic, Akkadian. In another corner, Uralic, Finnish, Hungarian. But in the center stands Sumerian, solitary, silent, with no kin to claim it. Scholars can describe its grammar, its vocabulary, its structure, but ask them who its relatives are, and the room falls quiet. This is strange, profoundly so. Languages evolve gradually, branching like trees, changing over centuries. They leave traces, loanwords, echoes. But Sumerian leaves none. Its roots are invisible, as if it had no past. Where did it come from? Was it invented? Imported? A remnant of a culture erased by flood and time? The mystery deepens. Around 2000 BC, Sumerian ceased to be a spoken language. Akkadian replaced it as the vernacular. Yet Sumerian endured in temples and schools as a language of scholarship, much like Latin in medieval Europe. Scribes studied it for centuries after it was dead, copying hymns and laws, preserving its voice even as no one spoke it at home. Why? Perhaps because it was sacred, tied to the gods and the founding myths of civilization. Or perhaps because no other language carried its weight of meaning. pause and imagine being a student in a scribal school of 1800 BC. The teacher dictates in Sumerian. You scratch symbols into clay, repeating forms you will never speak aloud outside the classroom. Your family speaks Akkadian, your neighbors too. Yet here, you memorize words from a language older than memory. It feels like incantation, a ritual to keep alive not just grammar, but identity. The comparisons are striking. Linguists point to other isolates Basque in Spain, surviving like a lone ember from pre-Indo-European tongues. Etruscan in Italy, a language of inscriptions with no clear relatives. Ainu in Japan, nearly extinct but still mysterious. Each isolate feels like a fossil, a voice from a vanished world. Sumerian is the oldest and grandest of them all, the first language ever written, yet still without a family. Some wonder if this solitude hints at a lost past. Could Sumerian be the last survivor of a broader linguistic family erased by time, conquest, or flood? Or was it imported by a people who arrived suddenly in Mesopotamia, bringing with them a tongue no one else understood? The archaeological record complicates things. The Sumerians seem to appear out of nowhere, their cities already advanced, their language already complex. Did they inherit it from unseen ancestors, or was it truly theirs alone? Consider how unsettling this is. We pride ourselves on tracing history, connecting dots, building genealogies of culture. But Sumerian refuses to fit. It reminds us that human origins are more tangled than we admit. Whole families of language may have existed, spoken by millions, and yet left no trace. Civilization remembers selectively. Most is forgotten, and yet fragments endure. Scholars pore over Sumerian texts, marveling at their richness. Hymns to Inanna, layered with metaphors. Laws codified with precision. Epics filled with longing and loss. Even riddles and proverbs survive. Proof that humor and wisdom flourished alongside power and ritual. The language may be isolate, but it was never barren. It carried the full range of human experience. Think of the irony. The first written language is also the most mysterious. We can read its words, but we cannot place its voice in the great chorus of humanity. It speaks, but it speaks alone. Perhaps that is why it fascinates us so deeply. In its solitude, it feels otherworldly, as if it does not belong entirely to Earth. Now compare with our own time. Today, thousands of languages teeter on the edge of extinction. Each carries unique ways of seeing the world. When one dies, a universe of thought disappears. The Sumerian mystery warns us. Once a language is gone, even if we preserve its grammar, we may never recover its soul. We can translate, but we cannot resurrect. Picture yourself again in the ruins of Ir. A fragment of a tablet lies half buried in sand. You brush it clean, decipher the symbols, whisper the words aloud. They sound alien, unlike anything spoken today. Yet, for a heartbeat, the silence breaks. The dead tongue speaks again, bridging 5 millennia. Then the wind scatters dust across your lips, and the voice is gone. The Sumerian language mystery endures. It is not just a puzzle for scholars, but a reminder for all of us. Civilization is fragile, memory is incomplete, and sometimes the most important stories are the ones we can never fully explain. Part 13. The Gods with Human Emotions. The temple is dark, lit only by flickering oil lamps. Statues of the gods loom above you, carved from wood, covered in gold, their eyes inlaid with shell and lapis lazuli. They are radiant, towering, untouchable. And yet the stories whispered about them are not tales of perfection. They are tales of passion, jealousy, rage, desire. The Sumerian gods were not remote ideals, they were painfully, vividly human. Take Enlil, Lord of the Winds. His power was immense, his decrees unchallengeable. Yet he was quick to anger, harsh in judgment. In one myth, his wrath brought the Great Flood, nearly erasing humanity. His emotions were not abstract forces, they were temper tantrums on a cosmic scale, reshaping the fate of mortals. Then there is Enki, god of wisdom and water. He was clever, generous, sometimes merciful but also sly, manipulative, even deceitful. He tricked, bargained, and outwitted other gods. In one story, he became drunk and foolish, allowing Inanna to steal the Ami, the decrees of civilization. Wisdom and folly lived side by side within him just as they do within us. And Inanna, radiant goddess of love and war. She blessed marriages with passion one moment and unleashed armies the next. Her heart swung between tenderness and fury, devotion and vengeance. She could seduce with a glance, yet strike down kings who defied her. Her descent into the underworld reveals her vulnerability, stripped of power, naked, abandoned. She was not just divine, she was fragile, unpredictable, dangerously alive. Pause here. What does it mean that the gods of Sumer were so human? Perhaps it reflects a profound truth. The Sumerians saw the cosmos as a mirror of themselves. The gods were not abstract principles or distant deities, they were projections of human psychology, amplified to divine scale. To worship them was to wrestle with human nature itself. Imagine sitting in a Sumerian courtyard, listening to a priest recite hymns. The story of Inanna's jealousy, Enlil's rage, Enki's trickery, these were not just entertainment. They were lessons, reminders that power comes with flaws, that no ruler, divine or human, is above weakness. In hearing of the gods' tempers, the people could understand their own. This makes the Sumerian pantheon startlingly modern. Many later religions elevated gods into perfect, distant beings, embodying ideals of justice, purity, omnipotence. But the Sumerians were honest. Their gods quarreled, lusted, deceived, raged. They were rulers, yes, but also family members locked in constant drama like kings in a palace or politicians in a court. Think of the parallels today. Our leaders, too, are not flawless ideals. They carry ambition, envy, desire. They argue, betray, reconcile. We expect perfection, but receive humanity. The Sumerians accepted this from the start. Their gods were powerful but flawed, divine yet human. In acknowledging that truth, their myths feel strangely timeless, even therapeutic. The stories also served as warnings. When Enlil lashed out, humanity suffered. When Inanna waged war, cities bled. When Enki deceived, chaos spread. Power magnified emotions, turning personal failings into cosmic events. The myths remind us, when rulers cannot control themselves, entire civilizations pay the price. Picture the scene. A Sumerian farmer kneels in prayer after a poor harvest. He does not blame chance. He believes Enlil is angry. Perhaps the king failed to offer sacrifice. Perhaps the city sinned. To appease the god is to appease the storm itself. The god's emotions are not distant, they are immediate, lived realities, woven into every famine, every flood, every war. But there is another side. These human gods also loved. They blessed fields with fertility, healed the sick, inspired poets to sing. Inanna's hymns describe not only her wrath, but her tenderness, her joy and passion, her delight in song. To worship her was not only to fear, but to celebrate the intensity of life. Psychologists today might call this projection humans creating gods in their own image. But the Sumerians seemed to embrace it knowingly. They did not shy away from depicting their gods as flawed, because flaw itself was sacred. Life was not about perfection, but balance, order, and chaos, love and anger, wisdom and folly. The gods embodied all of it. And so, when you look into the lapis eyes of an ancient statue, you are not staring at an abstraction of perfection. You're staring at a mirror. The gods were us, magnified. Their stories remind us that divinity and humanity are entwined, that our emotions, however messy, shape the world as much as reason or law. As you leave the temple, the night air cool against your skin, you hear laughter from a tavern nearby. Farmers, merchants, soldiers, all drinking, joking, arguing. Their voices rise and fall like the hymns of priests. In that moment, you understand what the Sumerians knew. The gods were not elsewhere. They were here in the noise of human life, in every burst of joy, every flash of anger, every longing heart. Part 14. The Descent of Inanna. The air is heavy with incense as the hymn begins. You are told of a goddess, brilliant, radiant, crowned with power, who makes a decision that will echo through eternity. Inanna, queen of heaven and earth, goddess of love and war, descends into the underworld. She does not go in triumph, but in surrender. The myth begins with preparation. Inanna gathers her crown, her necklace, her jewels, her royal garments. She adorns herself with symbols of power and authority. Each ornament gleams with divine brilliance. Yet she knows she cannot take them all. To reach the underworld, she must pass through 7 gates. At each one she is stripped of a possession, first her crown, then her staff, then her jewels, then her robe, until she stands naked, vulnerable, utterly exposed. Pause and picture it. The mighty goddess, once radiant with authority, forced to give up each layer of power. At the final gate, she is no longer queen, no longer warrior, no longer untouchable. She is simply Inanna, human, fragile. The descent is not only physical, but symbolic, the stripping away of ego, status, identity. At the throne of Ereshkigal, queen of the underworld, Inanna is judged. The verdict is death. Her body is hung on a hook, lifeless, abandoned. For 3 days and 3 nights the goddess of life lies still in the realm of death. The world above falters. Fertility wanes, love withers, war ceases. Without Inanna, existence itself feels muted, incomplete. But myths rarely end in silence. Enki, god of wisdom, sends Helptany beings fashioned from dirt and compassion. They enter the underworld unnoticed, mourn with Ereshkigal, soothe her pain, and in return, win Inanna's release. Revived, Inanna rises, reborn, carrying with her not just life, but knowledge of death. Yet even this triumph is incomplete. To leave the underworld, she must provide a substitute. When she finds her lover Dumuzi feasting in her absence, she condemns him to take her place. Balance is restored, but at a cost. What does this myth mean? On one level, it is about agriculture, the cycles of fertility and barrenness, the death of crops in winter and their rebirth in spring. Inanna's descent mirrors the earth's descent into dormancy, her return, the renewal of life. Dumuzi's half-year in the underworld reflects seasonal shifts, a poetic calendar woven into divine drama. On another level, it is about power. Inanna's stripping at the gates shows that no one, not even a goddess, can carry authority into death. Status, wealth, glory, all must be surrendered. It is a lesson in humility, a reminder that mortality equalizes all. even divinity cannot escape. But deeper still, it is about the human psyche. Modern psychologists see in the descent of Inanna a metaphor for transformation. To grow, one must descend, confront the shadow, the unconscious, the fears buried beneath the surface. To be reborn, one must first be broken. Inanna's death and resurrection mirror the process of initiation, therapy, even personal crisis. The stripping of power is not loss but preparation, a clearing for something new. Imagine listening to this story as a Sumerian. You live in a fragile world: floods, famine, war. Death is never far. And yet, here is a goddess who also suffers, who also dies, who also returns. Her myth promises that descent is not the end, that even in darkness there's hope of rising again. Now picture it cinematically. A golden goddess at the first gate, stripped piece by piece, her jewels clattering on stone floors. The underworld grows colder, darker, heavier with each step. At the throne of Ereshkigal, silence falls. The hook gleams in the shadows. And then emptiness. 3 days of stillness, until finally faint light returns. Footsteps echo. Breath stirs. The goddess rises, changed forever. The descent of Inanna is more than myth, it is archetype. It lives on in countless stories: Persephone in Greece, Jesus in Christianity, Osiris in Egypt, death and rebirth, descent and return, loss and renewal. The Sumerians gave it one of its earliest and most haunting forms. Compare this to our own lives. Who among us has not descended into grief, into despair, into the shadows of the self? Who has not felt stripped of identity, laid bare, forced to confront mortality? And yet, like Inanna, many emerge changed, deeper, wiser. The myth endures because it is not only about gods, it is about us. As you leave the temple, the hymn lingers in your mind. The stars wheel above, the night air cool and vast. Somewhere beneath the earth, Inanna still walks, still descends, still returns. Her story whispers across millennia. To rise, one must first fall. To live fully, one must die a little and be reborn. Part 15. Gilgamesh and the Quest for Immortality. The night is hushed, and in that silence, an ancient voice rises from broken tablets. It is the voice of the Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest story ever written, older than Homer, older than the Bible. Its clay fragments tell of kings and gods, love and grief, life and death. At its heart stands Gilgamesh, king of Uruk, 2/3 divine and 1/3 mortal, whose greatness could not shield him from the most human fear of all, the fear of death. The story begins with Gilgamesh as a tyrant, arrogant and restless. To humble him, the gods create Enkidu, a wild man of the steppe, hairy, untamed, living with beasts. At first they clash, but soon they become inseparable brothers, companions, soul mirrors. Together they slay monsters, defy gods, and carve their names into the world. Their friendship is the first great theme of literature, a bond so deep it still moves us across millennia. But friendship cannot escape fate. After insulting the goddess Inanna by spurning her advances, the pair incur divine wrath. Enkidu falls ill. His strength drains away. Gilgamesh, powerless to save him, watches his friend die. The grief is raw, unrelenting. Gilgamesh, mighty king, cries out, "Shall I not die like Enkidu? Woe has entered my soul. I am afraid of death." It is here that the story shifts. Gilgamesh's adventures are no longer about conquest, but about survival. He sets out on a desperate quest to escape mortality, to find the secret of eternal life. His journey takes him to the ends of the earth. He meets Siduri, the alewife, who urges him to abandon his search. Fill your belly. Day and night, be merry. For this is the lot of man. But Gilgamesh refuses. His fear is stronger than comfort. He presses on, across seas of death, to find Utnapishtim, the survivor of the great flood, the Sumerian Noah. Utnapishtim tells his tale, how he built an ark, survived the deluge, and was granted immortality by the gods. But he warns Gilgamesh, this gift is not for men. Immortality was a one-time mercy, not to be repeated. Still, he offers a chance. If Gilgamesh can stay awake for 6 days and 7 nights, he will prove worthy. Exhausted, Gilgamesh fails. Sleep takes him, as death one day must. Yet hope flickers. Utnapishtim reveals a secret plant that restores youth. Gilgamesh dives to the depths, retrieves it, clutches it with triumph. For a moment, immortality seems within his grasp. But on his journey home, a serpent steals it away. Gilgamesh weeps not just for himself, but for all humanity. The dream of eternal life slips through his fingers, and so he returns to Uruk, empty-handed but changed. He gazes upon its wall-stall, gleaming, enduring. He realizes his legacy is not immortality of the flesh, but of creation, of memory, of story. His name, carved into tablets, will outlast him. And here, 5,000 years later, it does. Pause here. What makes the Epic of Gilgamesh so powerful is not its monsters or gods, but its humanity. Gilgamesh is not perfect, he is arrogant, flawed, fearful. But his grief for Enkidu, his terror of death, his desperate search, these are ours. We see ourselves in him, across millennia. The story endures because it tells us the one truth that is never changed. We are mortal, and we must make peace with it. Compare this to our own time. Today, billionaires fund projects to extend life, scientists search for cures to aging, transhumanists dream of uploading minds to machines. Gilgamesh's quest is ours, reframed in the language of labs and algorithms. And like him, we may succeed for a moment, gain a year, a decade, a fleeting reprieve. But the serpent still waits. Mortality remains. And yet, the epic offers hope. Immortality is not in the body, but in what we leave behind. Gilgamesh found it in the walls of Uruk, in the story of his grief and his growth. We find it in art, in love, in memory. Perhaps death is not the end, but the mirror that gives meaning to life. Picture the final scene. Gilgamesh stands atop the walls of Uruk. The sun sets, painting the bricks gold. He looks down at the bustling city, the people who call his name, the legacy he has built. He knows he will die. But he also knows his story will endure. And here we are, 5,000 years later, still telling it. The Epic of Gilgamesh is not just the first story, it is the eternal story. It tells us what it means to live, to lose, to fear, and to hope. It whispers across time. You will die, yes, but you will also love, build, and be remembered. And that is its own kind of immortality. Part 16. The Stars and the Heavens. The desert night opens wide above you, a velvet dome pierced by countless sparks of light. There are no skyscrapers here, no artificial glow, no satellites to clutter the view. The stars are sharp, unbroken, endless. You lie on your back atop the steps of a ziggurat, and the sky feels so close you might reach out and touch it. This was the world of the Sumeriansa world, where the heavens were not distant abstractions, but living forces, speaking in patterns of fire. The Sumerians were among the first astronomers. They tracked the moon's phases, noting crescents and full cycles, marking months and years with precision. They charted the movements of Venus, associating it with Inanna, goddess of love and war. They recorded eclipses, predicting when the sun would vanish or the moon would turn blood red. With nothing but their eyes and patience, they turned the sky into a calendar, a map, a scripture. Imagine the priest astronomers at work. Each night, they climb to the Ziggurats summit, carrying reed styluses and fresh clay. They sit cross-legged, gazing upward, murmuring to one another as stars crawl across the sky. Every shift is noted. The star of Inanna rises in the east. The moon is swallowed in shadow. Their tablets survive, filled with calculations that later civilizations, Babylonians, Greeks, Persians would inherit and refine. The Sumerians were not just dreamers of myths, they were scientists of the sky. But to them, there was no divide between science and faith. Each star was a god's dwelling, each planet a divine presence. Venus was Inanna, Jupiter was Marduk, the sun was Utu. Astronomy was theology written in light. To observe the heavens was to converse with the divine. Omens were drawn not from superstition but from careful, repeated observation. When Venus lingered too long in the west, war loomed. When eclipses struck, kings trembled. The stars were not distant, they were destiny. Pause and compare this with our world. Today we map galaxies with the James Webb Space Telescope, capturing light billions of years old. We name exoplanets by catalog numbers, classify stars by spectral type. To us, the heavens are vast, indifferent. But the impulse is the same. We look upward, searching for meaning, for pattern, for reassurance that we are not lost in chaos. The Sumerians gave names and faces to what we now quantify with data, but both speak to the same yearning, to make sense of the infinite. Consider their achievements. They divided the circle into 360 degrees, the hour into 60 minutes, mathematical frameworks still in use today. They identified constellations, some of which remain familiar: the Bull of Heaven, Taurus, the Great Twins, Gemini. Their lunar calendar guided planting and harvest, feasts and sacrifices. To live without this knowledge would be to drift helplessly through the seasons. To master it was to survive. Now picture the awe. A Sumerian child lies awake, listening to her father point at the sky. "That is Inanna's star," he whispers, "brightest in the dawn." She sees the shimmering point and feels both fear and wonder. The gods are watching, guiding, judging. The heavens are not silent, they speak, if one knows how to listen. The myths intertwine with the science. In the story of the Tablet of Destinies, control of the heavens grants control of fate. In the myth of Inanna and Dumuzi, Venus's cycles mirror fertility and decline. Astronomy and theology were one fabric, woven seamlessly. To the Sumerians, to divide them would make no sense. The stars were both data and divine. And yet, the accuracy of their records raises questions. How did they track planets with such precision? How did they know Venus's complex cycle, invisible without years of observation? Was it merely patience, or did they inherit knowledge from an earlier age, perhaps even from the gods they worshipped? The clay tablets whisper, but do not answer. Today, we face similar mysteries. We scan exoplanets, searching for signs of life. We calculate probabilities of civilizations beyond Earth. The Sumerians would not be surprised. They, too, believed knowledge came from the sky, that wisdom descended from beyond. They encoded their faith into calendars and constellations. We encode ours into algorithms and telescopes. Both look upward, asking, Are we alone? Pause again. Look up. The stars you see are the same stars they saw. The constellations have not changed. The difference is in interpretation. Where they saw gods, we see nuclear furnaces. Where they saw omens, we see gravitational orbits. Yet perhaps the truth lies somewhere in between. Stars may be indifferent, but they still shape our lives, binding us to rhythms of time and tide. Imagine one last scene. A Sumerian priest finishes his observations, presses the last symbol into clay, and sets the tablet aside. He believes he has captured the will of the gods. Thousands of years later, an archaeologist brushes sand from that same tablet, reads the marks, and realizes he has captured something else entirely. The first steps of astronomy, the dawn of science. Both are true, both endure. The heavens of Sumer are gone, their temples in ruins, their priests long dead. But the stars remain, watching, as they always have. Perhaps that is the greatest continuity, that when we gaze upward, we join them, linked across millennia by wonder. Part 17. Agriculture and Water Control. The sun beats down on a flat plain where two rivers wind like silver snakes, the Tigris and the Euphrates. Between them stretches a land that should have been barren, parched, hostile. And yet, this was the cradle of civilization. The secret was not chance, but mastery. The Sumerians learned to command water. Picture the scene. Men and women digging canals, their backs bent beneath the heat. Reeds sway at the banks while oxen drag sledges laden with mud bricks. Wooden shovels scrape, baskets of soil are lifted and dumped. Slowly, a network of ditches take shape arteries of a living body. Water is guided from river to field, from field to storage pool, from pool to drinking jar. Life becomes predictable, fertile, sustainable. Without irrigation, Sumer would have been desert. With it, it became the world's first garden of cities. Grain was their lifeblood. Barley and wheat grew in abundance once the floods were tamed. Palm trees lined canals, offering dates for food and shade. Herds of sheep grazed on irrigated meadows, their wool spun into textiles. Fish teemed in channels trapped by woven baskets. Agriculture was not mere subsistence, it was surplus. And surplus meant trade, specialization, temples, writing, law. From mud and water rose civilization. But the system was fragile. Too much irrigation brought salt to the soil. Crops withered. Fields turned white with crystals. Too little water, and famine struck. The Sumerians lived in a delicate balance, forever negotiating with nature. Each canal was a gamble. Control the river, and you thrive. Miscalculate, and you starve. Imagine walking along one of these canals at dusk. The air smells of wet earth, barley stalks, and animal sweat. Farmers bend to check the channels, ensuring water flows evenly. Children chase each other along the banks, their laughter mingling with the croak of frogs. In the distance, the Ziggurat of rises, a symbol not just of religion, but of engineering, triumph, the city's heart, made possible by irrigation's veins. The organization required was immense. Canals had to be maintained, dredged, expanded. Entire communities worked together, guided by temple administrators. Records survive on clay tablets, lists of rations for laborers, schedules of water allotments, disputes settled by scribes. You took too much water for your field, one tablet accuses. You blocked the canal and ruined your neighbor's harvest. Even then, water was power, and conflict followed its flow. Now compare to our own world. Today, we build dams, pipelines, and desalination plants. We fight over rivers that cross borders the Nile, the Mekong, the Colorado. Climate change brings floods and droughts, testing our infrastructure. The story has not changed. Civilization still depends on water management. And like the Sumerians, we face the same truth. Nature will not be mastered forever. The fragility of their system became their downfall. By the end of the 3rd millennium BC, salinization devastated Sumer's fields. Yields plummeted. Cities weakened. Empires shifted north to Akkad and Babylon, where soil was fresher. The land between the rivers, once vibrant, became exhausted. The same mastery that birthed civilization also sowed its decline. Pause and reflect. This is a cautionary tale. The Sumerians were brilliant engineers, yet even they could not escape the long-term consequences of manipulating nature. Their canals turned deserts into gardens, but centuries later those gardens turned back into deserts. It is a cycle we recognize today. The price of short-term survival becomes the seed of long-term collapse. Still, there is wonder. The sheer audacity of their achievement digging canals with stone tools, coordinating thousands of workers without machines, creating order from chaos. They were the first to look at rivers and see not barriers, but blueprints. They did not wait for nature's mercy. They bent it, shaped it, wrestled with it. And from that struggle, they built the first cities. Picture the harvest. Fields of barley sway golden in the wind. Women sing as they cut stalks with sickles, piling them high. Donkeys groan beneath loads of grain. In the granaries, scribes tally the stores. How much for the temple, how much for the laborers, how much to trade? The city hums with abundance, the promise of another year secured. And all of it, every loaf of bread, every jar of beer, depends on the hidden veins of water beneath the soil. As night falls, you walk back along the canal. The water glimmers in torchlight, a ribbon of life flowing through darkness. The stars above shimmer with their eternal light. But you know your survival depends not on the heavens, but on the quiet, fragile miracle of water guided by human hands. The Sumerians left us more than ruins and myths. They left us the first lesson of civilization, to live together. We must master resources, but never forget their limits. Irrigation gave them life. Irrigation took it away. Between those two truths lies the story of humanity itself. Part 18. Daily Life and Rituals. The sun climbs over the mud-brick walls of Ur, painting the streets in gold and shadow. The city awakens not with silence, but with sound. The bray of donkeys, the rattle of carts, the chatter of merchants setting up their stalls. Smoke curls from ovens where women bake flat loaves of barley bread. Children chase each other barefoot through alleys, their laughter mingling with the cries of vendors hawking dates, beer, wool, and fish. This is daily life in summer mundane, bustling, alive. Civilization is not only ziggurats and kings, it is also breakfast, quarrels, songs, and rituals that mark the rhythm of ordinary existence. Imagine walking into the market square. The air smells of roasted onions and freshly brewed beer. Clay jars are stacked high, their stoppers sealed with mud. Merchants shout prices, arguing over measures. A scribe sits under a shaded awning, stylus in hand, recording transactions onto clay tablets. His customers cannot write, but they trust him to etch their bargains into permanence. Beside him, scales tip and clink, as silver is weighed not coins, but metal by weight, exchanged with precision. The variety is striking. Stalls overflow with goods, wool dyed with indigo, reed mats woven tight, pottery painted with spirals. Shepherds bring lambs bleeding on ropes. Fishermen display their catch, the smell sharp and salty. Traders from far lands pass through, their accents strange, their wares exotic lapis from Afghanistan, cedar from Lebanon, tin from Anatolia. The market is not just commerce, it is connection, binding distant worlds together through exchange. But beyond the market lies ritual. As the day progresses, citizens drift toward the temple. Priests chant hymns, their voices rising in waves. Incense burns, sweet and acrid, filling the air with smoke that clings to your clothes. Offerings pile before statues. Bread, beer, animals, woven cloth. Each gesture is both gratitude and negotiation, a plea for fertility, rain, protection. For the Sumerians, every transaction, whether in the market or the temple, was an exchange. Pay your neighbor, pay your God. Balance maintained. Pause and notice the rhythm of gender. Women grind grain, bake bread, brew beer. Many also own property, manage taverns, or serve as priestesses. Men plow fields, herd animals, fight in armies. Children learn trades from parents, though some destined for scribal schools spend their days pressing reeds into clay, practicing signs until their fingers ache. Life is structured, but not without movement. Roles overlap, shift, blur. Picture an evening. The work is done. Families gather in courtyards to eat stew of lentils and onions, dipped with bread. Beer is poured from clay jars into wide bowls, shared with straws. Songs rise, accompanied by lyres and drums. The music is lively, the words old. Above, stars wheel slowly across the sky, silent witnesses to the laughter below. And yet, beneath the ordinariness lies fragility. Disease is constant. Death comes suddenly, to child and elder alike. Graves beneath houses hold ancestors, their bones mingling with generations. Life expectancy is short, but life itself is celebrated in its fullness. Festivals erupt with dancing, sacrifices, and processions. Love poems survive on tablets, delicate and sensual, sung by young men and women under the same moon we see today. Civilization is not just survival. It is joy, longing, expression. Now compare with us. Today we shop in supermarkets, swipe cards, record transactions with digital clicks. They weighed silver on scales and pressed tablets with reeds. We attend concerts in stadiums. They gathered with lyres in courtyards. We bury our dead in cemeteries, they beneath their own homes. The differences are vast, but the essence is familiar. Trade, ritual, music, mourning. Human life has always been rhythm. The rituals of Sumer bound the city together. At festivals, whole communities processed through streets, carrying statues of gods, singing hymns, offering sacrifices. The smell of roasting animals filled the air. Priests recited incantations to drive out demons, heal the sick, bless marriages. These rituals were not optional, they were survival. Without the gods' favor, canals would dry, crops would fail, enemies would triumph. To honor them was not superstition, it was civic duty. But ritual also created beauty. The hymns to Inanna are some of the oldest poetry in the world, lines of longing, passion, devotion. They show us that daily life was not only toil, but imagination. Sumerians did not live only to survive, they lived to sing, to celebrate, to tell stories that gave meaning to their fragile existence. Picture the end of a day. The market has emptied, its stalls shuttered. Smoke rises from cooking fires, carrying the smell of stew. Families gather close, voices low, eyes heavy with fatigue. In the temples, lamps still burn, their light flickering on statues of gods who watch with carved eyes. The city breathes, alive with both noise and silence. Tomorrow it will wake again to the same rhythm trade, toil, ritual, joy. This is what it means to be human. Empires rise and fall. Gods are worshipped and forgotten, but daily life persists. The grinding of grain, the brewing of beer, the laughter of children. In the ordinary lies the eternal. Part 19. War and Power. Dawn breaks over the plain, but it is not the sound of merchants or farmers that fills the air. It is the clash of bronze on bronze, the shouts of men, the thunder of chariots. Sumer was not only the land of ziggurats and hymns. It was a land of rival city-states, each vying for control of the rivers, the fields, the gods' favor. Civilization here was forged not only in temples, but on battlefields. Imagine standing on the walls of Uruk as enemy forces approach. Dust clouds rise in the distance, kicked up by soldiers advancing in tight ranks. Their shields gleam in the sun, bronze spears bristling like a forest of death. At their head roll wooden chariots drawn by donkeys, their wheels clattering against the hardened earth. The people of Uruk gather, fearful yet resolute. War is coming. Sumerian city-states, Uruk, Lagash, were neighbors, but also rivals. They shared language, culture, gods. Yet they fought constantly over boundaries, canals, trade routes. Water was life, and whoever controlled the flow controlled survival. Clay tablets record disputes that escalated into bloodshed. Umma has diverted the canal, stealing water from Lagash. Such grievances, written thousands of years ago, read eerily like today's conflicts over rivers and oil. The armies themselves were disciplined. Soldiers carried rectangular shields of leather and wood, long spears, battle axes of sharpened bronze. Archers loosed volleys of arrows while chariots provided speed and shock. Warfare was brutal and close, the clash of bodies as decisive as the clash of weapons. Cities rose and fell with the fortunes of battle. One king boasted of piling the bodies of his enemies like heaps of grain. Another inscribed victories on stelae, ensuring his triumphs were remembered even when the dead were forgotten. Pause here. War, to the Sumerians, was not separate from religion. Battles were fought in the names of gods, victories offered as proof of divine favor. The spoils of war captives, land, wealth were dedicated to temples. Kings claimed legitimacy through conquest, presenting themselves as chosen champions of Enlil or Inanna. To resist a king's rule was not only rebellion, it was heresy. And yet, beneath the glory lay horror. Imagine a battlefield after sunset, the air thick with smoke and blood. Cries of the wounded echo in the darkness. Fires consume abandoned carts. Survivors stumble among corpses, searching for kin. The river nearby runs red, its life-giving waters tainted. For every inscription boasting of victory, there were countless voices silenced, unnamed, forgotten. Compare this to our world. We too fight wars for resources, for power, for ideology. Our weapons are steel and gunpowder, missiles and drones. Theirs were bronze and chariots. But the human story is the same. Ambition, fear, greed, survival. War is both timeless and tragically familiar. Sumerian politics revolved around this cycle of conflict. City-states rose, conquered neighbors, built empires, and then collapsed under new invasions. The Akkadians absorbed Sumer, then Babylon rose, then Assyria. Power shifted like the rivers themselves, never permanent, always contested. Each victory carved another line into the clay tablets, Each defeat erased names from memory. But war also brought innovation. The need for defense spurred the construction of massive city walls, some stretching miles around. Military organization demanded record-keeping, taxation, bureaucracy. Victories fueled monumental architecture. Ziggurats raised higher, temples richer. In this sense, war and civilization were twins, one feeding the other, shaping the destiny of Sumer. Think of the psychology. To live in this world was to live with constant tension. Every harvest, every festival, carried the shadow of war. Families prayed not only for rain, but for safety from raids. Children grew up watching soldiers march, hearing tales of victory and loss. War was not an exception, was a rhythm, woven into life itself. And yet, the Sumerians still dreamed of peace. Some hymns praise kings who brought rest to the land, who made the fields prosper, who silenced the clamor of weapons. These rare moments were cherished, remembered, longed for. Even in the oldest wars, humans dreamed of their end. Picture the final scene of a campaign. Victorious soldiers return to Ur, dragging captives, bearing tribute. Trumpets sound, priests chant. The king proclaims divine favor. But in the shadows, widows mourn, children cry, and the next war already brews. Civilization advances, but at a cost written in blood. This is the paradox of Sumer. The same brilliance that built temples and libraries also sharpened spears and forged axes. The same hands that pressed laws into clay also etched boasts of conquest. War was not the opposite of civilization, it was part of it. And perhaps it still is. 20. Legacy of Sumer. The ruins of Sumer lie silent now. The canals are choked with dust, the ziggurats worn down to shapeless mounds. Yet if you listen carefully, you can still hear the heartbeat of their civilization because Sumer never truly died. Its legacy flows invisibly through our lives, shaping how we think, write, measure, and govern. First, the gift of writing. Cuneiform, pressed into clay with reed stylus, began as tallies of grain and debts, but soon it blossomed into hymns, laws, epics. It was the first time human thought was captured, frozen, carried across generations. Without Sumer, we might still be speaking into the void, our words vanishing like smoke. Instead, we inherited permanence. Every book, every contract, every text message owes its existence to those first wedge marks scratched into wet clay. Then, law. The Sumerians codified rules into tablets, contracts, punishments, standards of justice. Later, Hammurabi of Babylon would etch his famous code, but the roots stretch back to Sumer. They believed order was divine, but also practical. Disputes over canals, marriages, property, all were settled not by whim, but by written decree. This was radical. Society governed by text, not by memory alone. Our constitutions, our legal systems, our very notion of rule of law trace their ancestry here. Mathematics and measurement were also their gifts. They divided circles into 360 degrees, time into 60 minutes per hour, 60 seconds per minute, a system we still use. They built calendars aligned to the moon and sun. They used geometry to survey fields, algebra to calculate rations. Their numbers, etched into clay, ripple into every clock on our walls, every GPS system guiding us today. Astronomy, too, flourished. They tracked Venus, the moon, the constellations. Their sky-watching fed into Babylonian and Greek science, into the astronomy of Islam, into the telescopes of Galileo. When we gaze at exoplanets with the James Webb Space Telescope, we are continuing the line of thought that began on Sumerian rooftops. where priests marked stars with simple styluses. But legacy is not only science, it is also imagination. The Epic of Gilgamesh is the oldest story still told, a tale of friendship, grief, mortality. Hymns to Inanna are the oldest poetry sung by human voices. Myths of floods, underworld journeys, divine councils all echo in later traditions: Noah and the Ark, Persephone and Hades, Zeus and his thunderbolts. The Sumerians dreamed the archetypes that we still carry in our stories. And there is more. The wheel for transport, the plow for farming, beer brewed from barley, schools where scribes studied, bureaucracies that taxed and recorded. These inventions are not exotic relics. They are the foundations of civilization itself. Without them, cities would collapse into chaos, nations into memory. Pause here and reflect. Sumer feels ancient, alien, distant, and yet its fingerprints are everywhere. Look at your clock divisions of 60. Look at your laws-written codes. Look at your stories' floods, heroes, gods. Look at your technology writing, wheels, irrigation. We walk daily in the shadow of Sumer, though most never realize it. Imagine a cinematic scene. The ruins of Ur under a blazing sun, tourists wandering among crumbling walls. Then the camera shifts. A digital screen glowing with numbers, a courtroom buzzing with arguments, a poet scribbling verses at midnight. Across millennia, the thread is unbroken. Civilization may shift names: Sumer, Babylon, Rome, America, but the root remains. But legacy is not only triumph. Sumer also left a warning. Their mastery of irrigation brought abundance, but also salinization that killed fields. Their rivalries built empires, but also endless war that drained cities. Their gods embodied human emotion, but also human folly. Their fall was as instructive as their rise. No civilization is eternal. Greatness carries seeds of decline. And yet, the most profound legacy may be humility. The Sumerians looked at rivers and learned control. They looked at stars and learned pattern. They looked at death and told stories of gods and kings. In doing so, they taught us that to be human is to seek meaning, to wrestle with chaos, to build and to lose and to build again. Now, as night falls over the desert, you stand among the ruins. The air is still, the sky vast. Around you lie broken bricks, shards of tablets, remnants of a world long gone. Yet within your mind, their voices live scribes, priests, kings, farmers, all whispering across 5,000 years. Their world has ended, but their legacy has not. It endures in every word, every law, every number, every dream. Sumer was the beginning, and though its cities lie in dust, we are all still Sumerian. RR 21, Lullaby Conclusion. The desert night has grown quiet. The voices of merchants, the clamor of soldiers, the chants of priests all have faded into silence. Only the wind remains, brushing softly over broken walls and empty courtyards. You sit among the ruins, the bricks still warm beneath your palms, and you realize the city is breathing no longer. It sleeps, as it has for thousands of years. Close your eyes. Imagine the canals filled once more, water glimmering under moonlight. Farmers move through barley fields, children laugh in the alleys, priests raise hymns to gods whose names still echo faintly in your memory. For a moment, the world of Sumer returns not as stone and clay, but as a whisper, a dream. And then, like all dreams, it drifts away. The stars remain, shining with the same cold fire they offered to Sumerian eyes. The rivers still wind their way to the sea. The earth still holds the stories pressed into its clay. But the voices have grown faint, like the scent of lavender carried on a night breeze, or the crumbling touch of wet paper left too long in the rain. You lean back, letting the darkness wrap around you. The ruins blur, the voices soften, the weight of history folds into quiet. What began as conquest, invention, and song ends here in stillness, in memory, in sleep. The past is never truly gone. It lingers, fragile and persistent, like a lullaby hummed across millennia.